The ship hung in the black like a dying breath, silent, cold, and running out of time. Outside the scratched viewports of the Odyssey's end, stars glittered with cruel indifference. Inside, 312 souls moved like ghosts through narrow corridors, their faces drawn, their steps slow. They weren't soldiers or explorers anymore. They were just people who'd run out of places to go. It had started on Mars, not the red dream sold in old Earth videos, but a cracked dome city called New Ares, built on hope and borrowed oxygen. When the terraforming reactors failed, sabotaged, some whispered. Worn out, others admitted, the sky turned toxic overnight. They barely made it to the evacuation shuttles. From there they drifted to Titan, Saturn's icy moon, where orbital habitats spun like silver beads in the void. But Titan's leaders shut the airlocks before the refugees even docked. No resources, the message said. No room. Just like that, another door slammed shut. Then came the moon. The free cities there were supposed to be open, neutral ground. But politics had hardened even the vacuum between worlds. A new treaty, buried in legal code thicker than ship plating, barred anyone from non-lunar origins from settling. They were allowed 3 hours in a quarantine bay, just long enough to refill water tanks and watch their children press palms against the glass, staring at Earthrise like it was a fairy tale. Now, weeks later, the Odyssey's end floated near the edge of charted space, its engines sputtering, its CO2 scrubbers wheezing. Food rations were down to nutrient paste and bitter algae cakes. Morale wasn't just low, it was gone. People spoke in whispers, if at all. Some stared at old photos on cracked tablets. Others just closed their eyes and pretended they were already asleep. Or already gone. At the heart of it all was the ship's captain. She hadn't slept in 2 days. Her uniform was stained, her hair pulled back in a fraying knot. She sat alone in the comms room, fingers hovering over the broadcast panel. Every channel they'd tried, Mars Emergency Net, Titan Relay, Lunar Unity Band, had echoed back with static or automated rejections. There was nowhere left to ask, but then an idea flickered. Not a plan. Just a memory. Earth. Not the Earth of their grandparents' stories. The burning, flooded, choked planet that forced humanity to flee in the late 21st century. Not the ghost world taught in off-world history classes as a cautionary tale. But Earth. The word itself felt strange on her tongue now, like a song half remembered. No one had heard from Earth in over 90 years. After the Great Exodus, the last government satellites went dark. The off-world colonies declared it non-viable. Over time, it became taboo to even mention it, like speaking of a grave. But what if, just what if, someone was still there? Her hands trembled as she keyed in a wideband transmission. No encryption, no protocol, just raw, open signal beamed toward the inner system. "This is captain of the civilian vessel, Odyssey's End," she began, voice rough but steady. "We carry 312 souls, former residents of New Ares. We've been turned away at Titan, denied entry at Luna. Our life support is failing. Oxygen at 42%, food for 12 days. We are not asking for a colony, not asking for citizenship, just a place to land. A chance to breathe real air again." She paused, throat tight. Then softer, "Does anyone remember Earth?" She sent the message and slumped back, bracing for silence. For the hollow hum of dead air. For the final confirmation that the universe had forgotten them. But then, faint, crackling, almost lost in the static, a voice answered. It wasn't polished like off-world comms. It sounded human, warm, tired, but kind. "Odyssey's End. This is Ground Station Theta. We read you, loud and clear." The captain froze. Her breath caught. "We've been listening," the voice continued. "We never stopped." On the bridge, others gathered, drawn by the sound. A young boy clutched his mother's leg, eyes wide. An old man who'd once farmed hydroponic wheat on Mars wiped his eyes without shame. Who are you?" the captain asked, barely above a whisper. A soft chuckle came through the speaker. "We're the ones who stayed, and we've been waiting for you to come home." Silence followed, but not the empty kind. This silence was full of possibility, of green things growing in quiet places, of rivers finding their way back to the sea, of a world that hadn't died, just healed. The crew exchanged glances. No one spoke. But for the first time in months, someone smiled. The captain keyed the thrusters. Send us your coordinates. As the ship turned slowly toward the inner system, toward the blue dot growing brighter in the viewport, no one mentioned the risks. No one asked if it was a trap. Because after being told no by every world that mattered, hearing yes from the one they'd been taught to forget felt like the first real truth they'd heard in a lifetime. Outside, the stars watched. But ahead, for the first time in decades, there was light that wasn't cold, light that came from a world that remembered their names, even if they'd forgotten its own. The descent was terrifying, not because of fire or shaking, but because of hope. For weeks, the crew had braced for impact, for betrayal, for another empty promise. But as the Odyssey's end slipped through Earth's upper atmosphere, what they saw through the viewports made them forget to breathe. Green. Not the sterile green of hydroponic trays or the flickering green of shipboard status lights, but real, wild, messy green. Forests stretched where deserts had once baked under a merciless sun. Rivers, wide and silver, cut through valleys that pulsed with life. Clouds drifted lazily, fat with rain, not acid. And the air, when the external sensors finally gave a reading, it was clean. Not perfect, not filtered, but alive. Full of oxygen, pollen, the faint scent of soil and wet leaves. They landed in a wide grassy field ringed by trees that looked ancient, their bark gnarled and wise. No landing pad, no towers, no soldiers. Just a few people standing in the open, hands at their sides, faces turned up toward the ship like they were greeting an old friend. The ramp lowered with a hiss, and the first breath of Earth air hit them like a memory they didn't know they had. It was cool, damp, and carried the smell of rain and something sweet. Maybe flowers, maybe fruit. A child from the ship stepped out first, barefoot, and sank her toes into the grass. She laughed, a real, startled laugh, and spun in a circle, arms outstretched, as if trying to hug the whole sky. The people waiting didn't rush them. They just stood there, calm, patient. One of them, an older man with sun-weathered skin and eyes that held decades of quiet work, stepped forward slowly. He didn't wear a uniform, just simple clothes, patched in places, dyed with plant colors. In his hand he held a woven basket filled with fruit, plums, apples, something round and orange they didn't recognize. "Welcome home," he said. His voice was the same one from the transmission. No one knew what to say. Some cried. Others just stared, overwhelmed. One woman dropped to her knees and pressed her forehead to the ground, whispering thanks to no one and everyone. Over the next few days, they learned the truth. Earth hadn't died. It had been given a chance. After the Great Exodus, when the last off-world ships fled, a small number of people stayed behind. Not because they were stubborn, but because they believed the planet could heal, if given time and care and no more machines tearing it apart. They dismantled the old cities not with explosives, but with hands and simple tools. They'd planted trees where highways used to be. They'd coaxed rivers back into their old paths. They'd bred bees from frozen DNA. They'd learned to live with less, much less, and found they had more. Their settlements weren't powered by fusion cores or orbital solar arrays. They used windmills made of reclaimed metal, water wheels carved from fallen timber, and sunlight caught in glass lenses to start fires. They grew food in layered gardens that mimicked forests, raised chickens and goats, and traded knowledge instead of credits. There was no government, not in the old sense. Just councils of elders, farmers, healers, and teachers who made decisions together, slowly, carefully. At first, the refugees didn't understand. They kept looking for control panels, for schedules, for rules. They asked about security, about borders, about who was in charge. The Earth people just smiled and said, "We take care of each other. That's enough." But not everyone trusted it. Some of the newcomers kept to the ship, sleeping in their bunks, eating their last rations. They whispered that this was too good to be true, that Earth must be hiding something, disease, surveillance, some slow trap. One man who'd once guarded supply depots on Mars paced the perimeter every night, scanning the tree line with a handheld scanner, convinced drones would appear at any moment. The captain understood their fear. She felt it too. After years of being treated like cargo, like problems to be managed or discarded, kindness felt dangerous. But then she watched a group of Earth children teach refugee kids how to climb trees. She saw an old woman show a former engineer how to weave baskets from river reeds. She tasted bread baked in a clay oven, made from grain grown in soil that had once been poisoned. And one evening, as fireflies blinked in the dusk, the older man, the one who'd greeted them, invited her to walk with him. They didn't talk much at first, just walked along a path lined with wildflowers, listening to crickets and the distant hoot of an owl. Finally, he stopped by a small pond, its surface shimmering with stars. "We never forgot you," he said quietly. "We knew you were out there. We heard the signals sometimes, faint, broken, but we knew humanity hadn't vanished. We just hoped one day you'd remember where you came from." She looked at him, really looked. Saw the lines on his face, the calluses on his hands, the calm in his eyes. "Why didn't you reach out? Why wait for us to come?" He smiled. "Because healing isn't something you force. It's something you offer. And you only accept it when you're ready." Back at the camp, a group had gathered around a fire. Someone had brought out an old guitar from the ship. Another person was singing, a lullaby from Titan, slightly off-key but full of heart. Earth people and refugees sat side by side, passing a clay cup of herbal tea, sharing stories in broken phrases and gestures. For the first time in years, the captain felt something loosen in her chest. Not just relief, belonging. Later that night, lying on a mat under a canvas shelter, she listened to the sounds of Earth. The wind in the leaves, the distant cry of a night bird, the soft breathing of people finally at rest. No alarms, no countdowns. Just life, slow and steady. She thought of all the worlds that had turned them away. Mars with its broken promises. Titan with its cold efficiency. The moon with its polished lies about order and safety. And here, on the planet they'd been taught to fear, they'd found open arms. It wasn't perfect. There were no hospitals with nanobots, no instant food synthesizers, no climate-controlled domes. But there was clean water. There was community. There was sky so wide it made your heart ache. And as she drifted off to sleep, the scent of rain on warm earth filling her lungs, she realized something simple, something true. They hadn't just landed on a planet. They'd come home. Life on Earth moved at a different rhythm. Days began with birdsong, not alarms. Meals were shared around open fires or long wooden tables, not eaten alone in cramped quarters. People worked with their hands, planting, building, mending, and there was a quiet pride in it. For many of the newcomers, especially the children, it felt like waking up from a long gray dream, but not everyone could let go of the past. Some of the refugees still wore their ship uniforms, even though the fabric was frayed and stained. They kept their ration packs sealed, slept near the grounded Odyssey's end, and flinched at sudden noises. They'd spent so long in metal boxes floating through silence that real wind, real rain, even real laughter felt strange, almost threatening. One man in particular couldn't settle. He'd been in charge of security back on Mars, used to giving orders, checking IDs, locking doors. Here, there were no doors to lock, no threats to scan for, no one to control. That made him restless, angry even. He started gathering others who felt the same, people who missed the certainty of ship life, who didn't trust this soft world where no one carried weapons and decisions took hours of talking. "This isn't survival," he'd say, voice low and sharp. "It's surrender. We're wasting time playing farmer while our real future is out there on the stars." He had a point in a way. The Odyssey's end was still mostly intact. Its engines could be repaired. Its navigation system still worked. With enough effort, they could strip it down, rebuild it, and launch again. Maybe find a new moon, a new station, somewhere that ran on logic, not feelings. The captain knew this talk was spreading. She saw it in the way some avoided the communal meals, in the hushed conversations that stopped when she walked by. She wanted to believe Earth was the answer, but guilt gnawed at her. She'd been one of the ones who'd helped convince the Off-World Council that Earth was beyond saving. She'd signed reports calling it ecologically terminal. She'd turned her back on this world without ever seeing it for herself. Now, walking through a sun-dappled orchard with the older man who'd welcomed them, she finally admitted it. "I helped write the papers that sealed Earth's fate," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I said it couldn't be saved, that it wasn't worth trying." He didn't look shocked, didn't get angry. He just kept walking, his hand brushing the leaves of a young apple tree as they passed. "People say a lot of things when they're scared," he replied gently. "Fear makes us quick to judge, quick to leave. But Earth never blamed you for leaving. It just kept healing." He stopped and turned to her. "You're here now. That's what matters." Later that day, she watched a group of kids, both Earthborn and refugee, digging in the dirt near a stream, laughing as they tried to build a tiny dam. One of the refugee children, a quiet girl who hadn't spoken much since Mars, was showing the others how to shape mud into smooth walls, just like she'd done in the ship's hydroponic labs. The Earth kids nodded, copied her, added their own ideas. Together, water pooled behind their little wall, clear and cool. It was such a small thing, but it felt huge. Back at the ship, tension was rising. The security man and his group had started taking tools from the storage bay, wrenches, power cells, even pieces of hull plating. They claimed they were salvaging, but everyone knew what they really wanted: to rebuild the ship, not for shelter, but for escape. The captain confronted them one evening as they hauled a crate of wiring toward the engine room. "This isn't yours to take," she said. "Standing in their path, it's ours," the man shot back. "We built this ship. We kept it flying, and we're not staying here to dig in the dirt while the rest of humanity moves on." "Humanity didn't move on," she said. "It scattered. And look where it got us, turned away alone, running out of air. Earth didn't run, it stayed, and it's offering us a place. A place to forget who we are," he snapped. "We're spacers, not farmers. We're people," she said softly. "And people need more than just oxygen and metal." "We need roots," he didn't answer. Just stared at her, jaw tight, then shoved past. That night, a red alert flashed on the ship's internal panel, a silent alarm only the crew would recognize. Someone had activated the emergency self-destruct sequence, not to blow the ship up right away, but to start a countdown that would vent the fuel cells, melt the core, and render the vessel useless. Or deadly. Panic spread fast. People ran toward the ship, shouting. Earth folks came too, not with weapons, but with questions, with concern. The captain sprinted to the bridge, heart pounding. She found the security man standing at the control console, fingers hovering over the final confirmation key. "Don't," she pleaded. "Why not?" he said, voice shaking. "If we can't leave, no one should have this ship. It's the last piece of who we were. And who are you now?" she asked. He didn't answer. His eyes were wet. He wasn't evil, just lost, terrified of becoming soft, terrified of needing help. Just then a small figure appeared in the doorway. The quiet girl from the stream. She'd followed the commotion. Without a word, she walked past the adults, climbed onto a chair, and tapped a sequence into a side panel. The red light blinked, then turned green. The countdown stopped. Everyone stared. I learned the override codes," she said shyly. "From the old logs. I didn't want the ship to die. It brought us here." The man looked at her, at this child who'd found joy in mud and water, who still cared about the metal bird that carried them across the stars. Something in his face cracked. He stepped back from the console. His shoulders slumped. "I just didn't know how to stay," he whispered. The captain put a hand on his arm. "None of us did. But maybe we're learning." Outside, the night was calm. Fireflies blinked. The wind carried the scent of blooming jasmine. And for the first time, the ship didn't feel like a lifeboat anymore. It felt like an anchor, finally dropped in safe harbor. The morning after the near disaster, no one spoke of blame. There were no punishments, no shouting matches. Instead, people gathered in the open field between the ship and the village. Not as two groups, but as one uneasy family trying to figure out how to move forward together. The man who'd almost triggered the ship's self-destruct sat apart at first, head down, arms wrapped around his knees like he was holding himself together. He didn't look at anyone. But no one shunned him either. A woman from the village brought him a bowl of warm porridge with berries. She set it down beside him and walked away without a word. He stared at it for a long time before picking up the spoon. Inside the Odyssey's end, the quiet girl who'd stopped the countdown was showing a group of Earth kids how the air recyclers worked. Not to fix them, but to understand them. This part pulls the bad air out, she explained, pointing to a filter caked with dust. On the ship, we had to clean it every week or we'd start coughing. One of the local boys nodded seriously. We use moss for that now. It eats the dirty stuff. Want to see? And just like that, a bridge formed. Not of metal or code, but of curiosity. But the tension hadn't vanished. It just changed shape. The man and his small group still believed leaving was the only real answer. They argued that Earth was fragile, that one bad storm or disease could wipe out everything. We've seen colonies fall, one of them said during a shared meal. One glitch, one leak, and it's over. Out there you can always find another place. Here you're stuck. An elder from the village, her hands gnarled from decades of planting and weaving, looked up from her bowl. You think running is safety? She asked gently. We stayed because we learned the hard way. There's no another place. Earth is the only home that ever truly held us. The stars are beautiful, but they don't feed you. They don't hold you when you cry. Silence followed. Not angry silence, thoughtful silence. Later that day, the captain called a meeting. Not a formal one with ranks and protocols, but a circle of logs and blankets under the shade of an old oak. Everyone was welcome. No one was forced to speak. The man finally stood. His voice was rough but calm. I don't trust easy answers, he said. I've seen too many promises break, but I watched that little girl save the ship not because she wanted to fly again, but because it mattered. And I saw how you all live, not with fear, but with care. Maybe I've been wrong about what strength looks like. He paused, then added, I don't want to destroy the ship, but I don't know how to stay. You don't have to know everything right now, the captain said. Just stay for today. Plant one seed, mend one tool. That's enough. And so slowly the ship stopped being a vessel and started becoming a resource. People began taking parts, not to rebuild and escape, but to build a future here. Solar panels were mounted on village rooftops. Water purifiers were hooked up to the communal well. The ship's medical bay, once sterile and cold, was turned into a healing hut. Its scanners repurposed to monitor soil health and crop growth. Even the old comms array was rewired to send low-power signals, not to call for rescue, but to share weather patterns with distant Earth settlements. The man who'd once guarded supply lines now helped build rainwater catchers. He worked side by side with a woman who'd spent her life tending lunar algae vats, and together they designed a system to filter runoff using layers of charcoal and river stones. He didn't smile much, but his hands moved with purpose now, not panic. One afternoon, the quiet girl was walking with the elder who'd spoken at the meal. They passed the spot where the ship's ramp met the grass. Do you miss the stars? The elder asked. The girl looked up at the sky, blue and endless. I used to think stars were the only light that mattered, she said. But here, the light comes from everywhere. The sun on leaves, fireflies at dusk, even the glow of mushrooms in the woods. It's softer, but it stays, the elder squeezed her hand. That's the difference. Out there you chase light, here you grow it. As weeks passed, something shifted in the air, not just in the camp but in the people. Arguments gave way to collaboration. Suspicion turned into shared jokes over shared work. Even the man who'd wanted to leave started teaching kids how to read old star charts. Not to navigate away, but to understand how far they'd come. Then came the day they decided to take the ship apart for good, not in anger, not in fear, but in ceremony. They gathered at dawn. No tools at first, just people standing in a circle around the Odyssey's end, hands on its hull, feeling the cool metal that had carried them through the dark. Someone began to hum. Others joined. It wasn't a song from any one world, it was something new, made in this moment for this place. Then, carefully, they began to dismantle it. Not wrecking, but harvesting. Every bolt, every panel, every wire was handled with respect. The hull sections became walls for greenhouses. The cockpit glass was turned into skylights. The engine core, once a heart of fire, was buried under a young grove of trees as a reminder. Even the fiercest machines can return to the earth. And through it all, no one felt like they were losing something. They were giving it back. That night, as a warm rain began to fall, the man who'd once stood ready to destroy the ship sat by the fire, watching the flames dance. The captain sat beside him. You staying? She asked. He looked out at the village, the lanterns glowing in windows, children chasing fireflies, the smell of bread and wet soil mixing in the air. "I think I already did," he said, and for the first time in a long time, he meant it. A year had passed since the Odyssey's end touched down, and the field where it once stood was now a garden. Not just any garden. Rows of vegetables, fruit trees, and flowering plants that buzzed with bees and fluttered with butterflies. Where the ship's shadow once fell, sunlight now warmed the soil, and children ran barefoot between the rows, chasing chickens or helping to water seedlings with handmade clay pots. Word had spread, not through loud broadcasts or official channels, but through quiet signals, old emergency frequencies patched together satellites, even handwritten notes carried by rare supply traders who still flew between the outer colonies. The message was simple: Earth lives, and it welcomes you home. At first, no one believed it. Too many lies had been told about Earth over the decades. But then a family arrived, 3 adults and 2 kids from a failing habitat orbiting Jupiter's moon Callisto. Their ship was little more than a patched-up cargo hauler, its paint peeling, its engines coughing. They landed in the same field, trembling as they stepped onto grass for the first time. They were given food, clean water, and a place to sleep under a roof made of reeds and reclaimed metal. No questions, no forms. Just open hands. More came after that. A lone engineer from a derelict Venusian station, her skin pale from years under artificial light, squinting in the sunlight like it was a miracle. A group of teachers and students from a lunar school that shut down when funding vanished. Each arrival was met the same way. Not as strangers, but as family returning from a long journey. There were no grand ceremonies, no flags raised. Just shared meals, shared work, and the slow, steady rhythm of rebuilding not just lives, but trust. The captain no longer wore a uniform. She wore simple clothes dyed with berry juice and plant roots. She still taught, but not navigation through asteroid fields. Now she walked with small groups through the woods, showing them how to read the land. The way birds call before rain, how moss grows on the north side of trees, how certain flowers open only at dawn. "The stars are still there," she'd say, pointing up at night. "But now you've got roots to stand on while you look at them." The older man who'd stayed behind all those years now spent his mornings in a quiet grove just beyond the village. There, on the smooth bark of young trees, he helped newcomers carve their names, not in metal or data chips, but in living wood. Each name was a promise: I am here. I belong. Over time, the grove became a forest of stories, leaves whispering the names of those who'd once been lost but found their way back. And the quiet girl, the one who'd saved the ship with her quick thinking, had become something of a bridge between worlds. She spent her days in the old healing hut, not just studying Earth's herbs and remedies, but teaching others how to adapt off-world knowledge to this new life. She showed how to use ship-grade sensors to monitor soil moisture, how to repurpose battery casings into nesting boxes for birds. She never spoke much, but when she did, people listened. One spring morning, she stood on a hill overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, once choked with plastic and poison, now clear enough to see dolphins leaping in the distance. In her hands, she held a small sapling. Its roots were wrapped in damp cloth, its branches delicate but strong. It was an apple tree, but not from Earth. Its seeds had been saved from the last fruit ration aboard the Odyssey's end, carried across the void like a secret hope. She dug a hole in the soft earth, careful not to damage the roots. Around her, others gathered, not to watch, but to help. Someone brought water in a clay jug. Another placed smooth stones around the base to hold the soil. The captain knelt beside her, brushing dirt from the leaves. "This tree won't just grow apples," the girl said softly. "It'll grow something new, a mix of out there and here." No one said anything for a while. They just stood in the sun, listening to the waves, feeling the wind carry the scent of salt and blossoms. Later that day in the village square, a new arrival, a teenager from a mining outpost near Saturn, sat with a group of Earth kids trying to braid reeds into a basket. His hands were clumsy at first, used to handling drills and metal, not plants. But the kids didn't laugh. They showed him again, and again, until his fingers learned the rhythm. That night, as firelight flickered and someone played a tune on a flute carved from bamboo, the teenager looked around, at the faces lit by flame, at the stars above, at the dark outline of the hills holding them all like a cradle, and for the first time in his life, he didn't feel like he was waiting for something better to happen. He was already in it. Earth didn't offer perfection. Storms still came. Crops sometimes failed. Old fears still whispered in the dark. But here no one had to face them alone. Problems were shared. Joy was multiplied. And every morning the sun rose over a world that had chosen to heal, not just its land, but its people. The message that had once been a desperate plea, "Does anyone remember Earth?" had become an invitation, passed quietly from soul to soul across the silent dark. Come home. And one by one they did. Not as refugees, not as survivors, but as neighbors, as gardeners, as storytellers, as people who finally understood that home isn't a place you escape to, it's a place you help grow. And in that growing, they found something they'd almost forgotten how to be. Human. Not perfect, not powerful, just present, just together, just home.